Section 1. Start here. Enforceable contract. Contract law in today's market. Introduction to contract law in real estate. Every real estate transaction begins with a promise. A buyer promises to purchase property. A seller promises to transfer ownership. A landlord promises possession of property in exchange for rent. These promises are written into contracts, and those contracts form the legal backbone of the real estate industry. Without enforceable contracts, there would be no reliable system for buying and selling real property. This course begins with the fundamental principles that determine whether a contract is legally binding. Throughout this course, you will explore how contract law applies to real estate practice in Arizona, how contracts are formed, how they can be discharged, what happens when contracts are breached, and how real estate professionals can reduce liability by understanding the legal structure behind the agreements they prepare every day. Arizona real estate licensees operate within a regulated environment governed by Arizona Revised Statutes, Title 32, Chapter 20, which establishes licensing requirements and professional duties for brokers and salespersons. These statutes outline how licensees must conduct themselves in real estate transactions and establish disciplinary authority for the Arizona Department of Real Estate. Modern real estate practice also requires licensees to comply with administrative rules contained in Arizona Administrative Code Title 4, Chapter 28, which governs professional conduct, supervision, advertising, and documentation requirements for licensees. For example, AAC R4 281101 establishes the professional duties of licensees, including the obligation to exercise reasonable care, honesty, and disclosure of material information when assisting in real estate transactions. Understanding how these legal requirements interact with contracts helps real estate professionals avoid costly disputes and protect their clients. Before we begin examining specific contract components, it is important to understand that a contract is not simply a document. A contract represents a legally enforceable agreement that creates rights and obligations between parties. If those obligations are not fulfilled, courts may step in to enforce the agreement or award damages to the injured party. Contract law defined in real estate transactions. Contract law is the body of legal rules that governs agreements between parties. In real estate transactions, contracts define the rights, duties, and expectations of buyers, sellers, landlords, tenants, lenders, and brokers. These agreements outline everything from purchase price and financing terms to inspection periods, closing deadlines, and property disclosures. For example, when a buyer submits a written offer to purchase a home, that document becomes the foundation of a potential contract. Once the seller signs the offer without modification, the agreement becomes legally binding. The terms within that contract dictate how the transaction will move forward and what each party must do to complete the transaction. Arizona law places significant responsibility on real estate licensees when assisting in transactions. Under AAC R4 281101, licensees must exercise reasonable care and diligence when communicating material information and assisting clients. This includes ensuring that clients understand the terms of the contracts they sign and the obligations those contracts create. Historical origins of contract law and modern application. The concept of contract law has deep historical roots dating back centuries. Early legal systems recognized that agreements between individuals should be enforceable if certain basic elements were present. Over time, courts developed rules to determine when a promise should be legally binding. These rules evolved into the modern doctrine of contract law that governs agreements today. In the United States, contract law is largely governed by state law, which means each state establishes its own legal standards for determining whether an agreement is enforceable. Arizona courts rely on long-standing legal principles when evaluating real estate contracts and disputes arising from them. One well-known Arizona case that illustrates how contract law intersects with disclosure obligations is Hill v. Jones, 1986. In this case, the Arizona Court of Appeals held that sellers and their agents may be liable for failing to disclose material facts that affect the value or desirability of a property. The case involved termite damage that was not disclosed to the buyer. The court determined that the failure to disclose a material fact could constitute fraud and may lead to liability for damages. This case highlights an important lesson for real estate professionals. Contracts do not exist in isolation. They are influenced by disclosure laws, professional conduct rules, and the duty of honesty and fairness in negotiations. 5 elements of an enforceable contract. For a contract to be legally enforceable, certain legal requirements must be present. Courts generally recognize 5 essential elements that must exist for a valid contract to be formed. If any of these elements are missing, the contract may be considered void, voidable, or unenforceable. The 5 elements of an enforceable contract include mutual agreement, offer, and acceptance. Both parties must agree to the same terms. This agreement is typically created through the process of offer and acceptance. Consideration. Something of value must be exchanged between the parties. In a real estate transaction, consideration typically consists of money in exchange for property ownership. Competent parties, capacity. The parties must have the legal ability to enter into a contract. Minors or individuals who are mentally incapacitated may not have legal capacity. Legal purpose. The contract must involve a lawful objective. Agreements involving illegal acts cannot be enforced by courts. Intent to create a legal relationship. Both parties must intend for the agreement to be legally binding rather than a casual promise. Consider a simple real estate example. A buyer offers $400,000 for a home, the seller accepts the offer, both parties are legally competent, and the property transfer is lawful. Because consideration is present and both parties intend to complete the transaction, the contract satisfies the legal elements required for enforceability, offer, and the creation of contractual intent. A contract begins with an offer. An offer is a proposal made by one party to another, indicating a willingness to enter into a legally binding agreement under specific terms. In real estate transactions, offers are typically made through written purchase contracts submitted by a buyer to a seller. For an offer to be valid, it must include clear and definite terms. These terms commonly include the purchase price, financing arrangements, earnest money deposit, inspection periods, and proposed closing date. If the offer is vague or missing essential terms, it may not be legally enforceable. Once the offer is delivered, the receiving party has several choices. The party may accept the offer, reject it, or present a counteroffer that changes the original terms. Negotiations may continue through several counteroffers before both parties reach a final agreement. Withdrawal, expiration, and revocation of offers. An offer does not remain open forever. Several events may cause an offer to terminate before acceptance occurs. Understanding these concepts helps real estate professionals manage negotiations and avoid confusion between parties. One way an offer may terminate is through withdrawal by the party who made the offer. If the offering party communicates that the offer is withdrawn before acceptance occurs, the offer is no longer valid. Another common termination method is expiration. Most real estate contracts contain a deadline for acceptance. If the offer is not accepted before that deadline, it automatically expires. Offers may also terminate if they are rejected or if a counteroffer is presented. Because a counteroffer changes the original terms, it replaces the original offer entirely. Finally, an offer may terminate if one of the parties dies or becomes legally incapacitated before acceptance occurs. In that situation, the legal ability to form a contract may no longer exist. Understanding how offers begin and end is critical for real estate professionals because negotiations often involve tight deadlines and competing offers. Clear communication and careful documentation help prevent disputes during this stage of the transaction. Online discussion. 1. Question. Why is it important for real estate agents to understand the legal elements of a contract rather than simply relying on pre-printed forms? Answer. Real estate forms provide a framework for transactions, but the forms themselves do not guarantee enforceability. Agents must understand how contracts function legally in order to properly explain terms to clients, recognize potential problems, and avoid drafting errors that could lead to disputes or liability. 2. Question. What problems might arise if a buyer believes a contract exists, but the seller has never actually accepted the offer? Answer. If the seller has not communicated acceptance, a contract may never legally exist. The buyer might believe the property is under contract while the seller continues negotiating with other parties. This misunderstanding can lead to lost opportunities, disputes, or potential legal claims. 3. Question. Why do most real estate contracts include deadlines for acceptance of an offer? Answer. Deadlines create certainty and encourage timely decision-making. Without a deadline, offers could remain open indefinitely, creating confusion and preventing other negotiations from moving forward. Deadlines protect both buyers and sellers by establishing clear expectations.